a silence falls heavier than grief. And in that silence, a voice unfurls like a candle's final flame. It begins with a truth so stark it stills your breath. Existence is suffering, and that suffering is not an accident. It is the canvas upon which consciousness paints its tragic masterpiece. In that silent ignition, your mind quiets, the noise subsides, and you stand before a void with aching clarity. You recognize how desire, that insatiable phantom, leads you by the nose into corridors of endless longing. The modern promises ease, comfort, perpetual novelty are illusions cast by a culture that fears stillness. In chasing them, you hollow yourself, trading depth for distraction and pinning your soul to a flickering screen of simulated joy. Yet in the shadow of that glow, the real pain waits, patient and unmoved. In the first tremor of awareness, you feel the weight of suffering. It is not shameful, it is elemental. Birth, illness, loss, aging, death, they are not anomalies, but the very structure of being. You carry within you a line of ancestors who bowed under the same, and you now walk along the same fragile spine of time, your hopes crashing against impermanence. The relief arrives not in denial, but in recognition. Suffering is the presence of life unmasked. The illusion of progress promises escape, but every new convenience births a new need. 1,000 desires bloom only to wither in the next moment. We assemble gadgets, we construct networks, we chase experiences, and still we remain hungry. Why? Because the will, ceaseless and ungoverned, demands more, even as it receives less. Energy spent on maintaining illusion is energy drained from the only sanctuary you might possess: inner stillness. By now, the viewer's chest may tighten a subtle contraction as the first release arrives. It is the shock of recognition. You confront the futility of chasing tomorrow's promise. Tomorrow dissolves into yet another cycle. The relief is that awareness cuts the knot, suffering stays, but illusion retreats. You taste the emptiness beneath hype and hustle, and that emptiness feels less dreadful than the crash of expectation. In the next breath, you trace how culture distracts the gaze with spectacle, celebrities, algorithms, images flashing faster than thought, and how your inner world dims in their glare. You become a spectator in your own life, disconnected from the muscle of being. And yet suffering stirs beneath. Inner restlessness, impatience, guilt, existential dread. No playlist, no curated feed. No dopamine spike can soothe what remains unsaid in your heart. Another release comes, the small relief of detachment. You stop buying the lies. You let the pulse of culture fade, and in the thinning of distractions, you hear your own pulse. That pulse is neither excitement nor fear. It is simply being unadorned. It may feel hollow, but in that hollow resides a door. You move deeper, confronting illusions of identity. The ego whispers, you are your roles, your likes, your stories, but stories unravel, roles expire. When you cling to them, you suffer the terror of collapse. The deeper truth, you are the silent witness behind all stories. Recognition dawns slow, icy, liberating that identity is not form, but the awareness that perceives form. In that realization, anguish loosens its grip, not because suffering vanishes, but because the watcher sees suffering does not become it. You breathe again light, returning not as joy, but as sobriety. The release point is subtle. A quiet space opens between sensation and reaction. Within it, you sense a peace older than belief. You walk, the memory of love, lost the phantom presence of someone gone. Grief is a teacher too. It reveals how much you hoped, how deeply you believed in permanence. Yet grief unmasks illusion, nothing stays. The relief is painful. You learn impermanence, not in philosophy, but in tears. In the soberness of absence, you glimpse the fragile beauty of connection and of letting go. You see suffering as a mirror rather than a punishment. Every wound reflects the will's defiance of reality, a refusal to surrender to what simply is. To suffer is to confront existence as it stands, not as you wish it were. And that confrontation, in its honesty, is luminous. The next release. Acceptance without resignation. Not a passive collapse, but a conscious yielding. You stop fighting the world's nature. You drop the struggle against time, loss, limitation. In that yield, you regain energy, the soul no longer fatigued by resistance. You feel a strange ease, not happiness, not contentment, but a stillness, less noisy than desire. You turn inward, not searching for comfort, but surveying the architecture of illusion in your mind. You recognize false divisions, self and other, inside and outside, mind and world. Those edges dissolve in awareness. You find that compassion arises naturally not from moral duty, but from seeing all beings ensnared in the same dream of separation. The final release, compassion unbidden, flowing from recognition that suffering binds us. You do not cheer for life's beauty, you bow before its tragedy. And in the bowing you glimpse unity, not a sentimental oneness, but the still ground beneath the storm. Now you approach the solitude of truth, not heroic, but quiet, no fanfare, just a slow fade of illusion's light. In that solitude, the will recedes, not extinguished, but held in gentle reserve. You do not cling to peace, you accept turbulence. You do not seek joy, you observe emptiness. The voice softens. The monologue dissolves into silence. You linger at the edge of the world, candle guttering, breath, light. The final words are not words, they are absence. Mind dissolves, self dissolves, desire dissolves. Only awareness remains, unmoving, unclaimed, infinite. All pleasure is but the brief cessation of pain, a trembling interval between two wounds. Even the sweetest moment is a reprieve, not a salvation. We do not enjoy, we recover, and the soul, in its secret lucidity, knows this. It knows that desire, dressed as delight, merely postpones the return of emptiness, that every craving fulfilled leaves behind a shadow larger than itself. What we call happiness is only the anesthesia of distraction, a narcotic wrapped in novelty. It has no roots, only movement. Once it pauses, its hollowness becomes audible, like silence after a thunderous applause that reveals how little was truly heard. The will, like a restless animal, cannot be soothed, it can only be exhausted. But exhaustion is not peace, it is merely the body's surrender when the soul still resists. We wander from moment to moment, as though time were a savior. But time is the soft executioner, wearing no mask, speaking no threats. It simply carries us forward, while quietly eroding everything we love. Its mercy is forgetfulness, and its cruelty is memory. Those who claim to live in the present do not understand that the present is a collapsing edge between the already lost and the never arriving. One does not live in it, one is undone by it. The more one seeks meaning, the deeper one sinks into illusion. For meaning is the soul's attempt to bind chaos into story, to tame the wild horror of purposelessness with the grammar of hope. But existence is pre-linguistic, it speaks in suffering, not sentences. It offers no narrative arc, only repetition, birth, striving, failure, death. The cycle mocks interpretation, and, in the laughter of the void, the ego trembles. To awaken is not to rise, but to stop running, to see that every escape route is carved by the same fear, the fear that nothing matters. And yet, in the surrender to that fear, a strange serenity unfolds. When one no longer demands that life be meaningful, one begins to see, not symbols, not lessons, but reality, as it is unadorned, indifferent, complete. Relationships do not rescue us from solitude, they reveal it. In every embrace lies the ache of separation. No one can cross the chasm of subjectivity. We touch, we speak, we promise, but always from a distance. The soul remains untranslated, no matter how tender the attempt. Loneliness is not the absence of others, it is the presence of the self. And that self, when fully seen, is unbearable. The body, once worshipped as temple, is discovered to be a cage of nerves and decay. It itches, hungers, ages, breaks. Its pleasures are momentary, its maintenance unceasing. We dress it in beauty, we name it identity, but it does not belong to us. It is rented flesh, and the rent increases with time. Beneath every smile lies a skull, and beneath every kiss, the echo of mortality. To detach is not to reject life, but to stop mistaking it for a promise. Detachment is the clarity that emerges when hope has been outlived. It is not indifference, it is sobriety. One does not flee the world, but stands within it without illusion. The rain falls, the leaves die, the heart aches, and one does not ask why. One simply watches. Desire clings to form, but form is always dissolving. Every object of longing carries within it the certainty of loss. Beauty fades, achievement rusts, intimacy wanes. What begins must end. This is not tragedy, it is structure. To see it is to weep, not from sadness, but from the shattering simplicity of what has always been true. In detachment, there is a kind of love, not for what things are, but for what they are not. One no longer wants to possess, but to witness. One loves not the face, but the transience of the face. Not the moment, but the vanishing of the moment. Love, in its purest form, does not cling, it grieves. The will, confronted with the futility of its own striving, may finally fall silent, not in defeat, but in revelation. It sees that nothing it desires can satisfy, that every joy contains its own expiration. And in that silence, there is a glimmer, not of hope, but of peace beyond hope. A peace that asks for nothing, fears nothing, needs nothing. And so the soul, emptied of its stories, stands naked before the world. No longer asking for meaning, no longer running from pain, just breathing, just being, just watching the candle burn, the river flow, the world rise and fall without a single promise. To exist is to suffer the weight of the world, pressing inward, without mercy, without explanation. Each breath is drawn through a throat, scorched by longing. The soul, fragile and restless, reaches for what the world cannot provide: permanence, union, peace. But the world offers only its own flux, its own impermanence, its own cruel indifference. And so we are torn, forever torn, between what we crave and what is. Even the noblest pursuits become traps. Art, love, wisdom, they lift for a moment, only to reveal their limits. The painter longs to capture beauty, but beauty shifts and flees. The lover seeks to merge, but finds only skin and silence. The seeker desires truth, but truth is a blade that cuts away everything the ego calls sacred. All striving, whether base or exalted, is rooted in the same torment: the will's refusal to accept that nothing endures. And so suffering persists, not as punishment, but as essence. It does not visit us, it is us. We are the locus of yearning without end, the stage upon which desire performs its tragic comedy. To be alive is to hunger. To be awake is to know that hunger will never be satisfied. No feast, no embrace, no insight will still the will. At most, they distract. More often, they deepen the ache. There is a moment when one no longer seeks escape, not because the pain has ceased, but because the desire to flee has dissolved. This is the moment of awakening, the quiet collapse of illusion. One sees the world not as it should be, but as it is. A theater of shadows cast by a fire none can touch. We are puppets animated by longing, our strings tangled in our own hands. The dance continues, even after we know its futility. This knowledge is bitter, but bitterness is not the enemy. It is the first honest taste of life, stripped of decoration. The sweetness sold to us of progress, of destiny, of romantic fulfillment is a lie stitched into our culture, repeated until we mistake it for truth. But truth does not comfort. It strips, it burns, it empties. And only in that emptying does something new, something ancient emerge. It is the recognition that peace cannot be grasped, only discovered in surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but of understanding. One ceases to struggle not because one is broken, but because one finally sees the futility of struggle. The ocean does not rage against the shore, it simply recedes. The wind does not resent the trees it passes through. To live without resistance is not to be passive, but to be aligned with what is inevitable. And in this surrender, time slows. The compulsive drive toward future achievement fades. One walks more slowly, speaks less urgently, listens more deeply. Each moment, emptied of expectation, becomes vast. Not because it contains something precious, but because it is no longer required to. It simply is. The breeze moves through the leaves, and that is enough. A single breath becomes the whole universe quiet, complete, and transient. Others may still chase, still grasp, still preach. Let them. You no longer believe in the race. You have stepped off the path, not to find a new one, but to let go of paths entirely. You watch them run, and you do not envy their speed. You watch them cheer, and you do not crave their joy. For you have touched something they do not yet see, the stillness beneath the chase, the silence beneath the song. And this stillness is not yours. It belongs to no one. It simply is. Like the sky after the storm, like the desert at night. It has always been there, obscured by the noise of wanting. Now, the wanting has quieted, and the stillness shines. Not brightly, but steadily. Not like a torch, but like starlight, cold, distant, eternal. You begin to understand that the self you defended was never solid. It was a collection of reactions, a pattern of desires, a mask worn too long. Now the mask falls, and behind it there is no face, only space. Awareness without identity, presence without name. This is not annihilation. It is liberation from the illusion of being someone. To die before dying, this is the strange gift of wisdom. When the self dies, fear dies with it. One no longer clings to reputation, to purpose, to control. One no longer trembles before loss. For what is there to lose when there is no one left to possess? What remains is not a person, but a witness. A gaze without judgment, a heart without ambition. In this dissolution, there is no euphoria, only calm, only the quiet joy of nothing needed, nothing sought. The world continues its violence, its spectacle, its ceaseless spin, but you are no longer within its machinery. You have become the still point around which it turns, the eye of the storm, the silence at the heart of all sound. And from this silence, a final breath forms, not to declare, but to dissolve, not to inspire, but to vanish. The candle flickers, the flame bows, and in its dying light you see clearly. Not because you have gained insight, but because everything false has fallen away. What remains cannot be spoken, it can only be felt, like the last warmth of a body that has already begun to fade. ChatGPT Danoi. Even now, the remnants of the will stir in quiet corners, whispering with familiar voices. The ache for recognition, the longing to be understood, the soft urge to be remembered, they persist, faint but insistent, like echoes in a cathedral long abandoned. One sees them not as enemies, but as old companions grown transparent. They knock, but we do not answer. We know their offerings, and we know their cost. Recognition is not connection, it is reflection, and the one who craves it is still trapped within the mirror. Every identity affirmed becomes a wall between what is and what perceives. Praise is a narcotic, soothing the illusion of permanence, but it fades quickly and demands more. To be understood is a beautiful dream, but it rests on the false assumption that there is someone there to be grasped and someone capable of grasping. In truth, we are shifting patterns in an empty field. The more we try to hold ourselves still, the more we distort. So solitude deepens. Not as isolation, but as reality. The soul learns to walk alone, not by choice, but by necessity. There is no one who can carry your sorrow, no one who can bleed your wounds. Others may love, may offer presence, but they cannot dwell within your suffering. That is your country, that is your inheritance. And when you stop resisting it, it ceases to torment you. It becomes a landscape, vast, barren, honest. And what of love? That trembling gesture toward another, that reaching out of the self toward what seems like unity. It too is ruled by the will. Even in its purity, it seeks to merge, to possess, to escape the agony of separation. But the other remains the other, always. You can touch skin, speak thoughts, intertwine dreams, but you cannot erase the barrier of being. Love does not conquer separation. At best, it acknowledges it with tenderness. The one who no longer clings finds a different kind of love, quieter, emptier, truer. It is the love that does not demand, does not promise, does not fear its own ending. It does not bind, nor does it beg. It merely flows and vanishes like mist at sunrise. And in its wake, there is not heartbreak, but a solemn gratitude for having felt at all. The soul, stripped of illusion, becomes receptive to what remains, not beauty in the conventional sense, but form as it is, without commentary, a cracked wall, the smell of dust, the sound of wind against a decaying window pane. The world, once hidden beneath desire, reveals itself in its bare simplicity. And it is not indifferent, it is beyond caring. It neither welcomes nor rejects. It simply is. This is the point at which many turn back. The silence is too vast, the absence of meaning too raw. They flee into belief, into distraction, into the narcotics of purpose. But those who stay, those who endure the full collapse, find themselves on new ground. Not higher ground, there is no ascent here, but deeper, more still, more honest. For here, the self dissolves into awareness. There are no goals left, no image to maintain, no role to fulfill. There is only the moment untainted by projection, untouched by desire. The pain remains, but it is no longer personal. It is existence itself, breathing through you. You do not resist it, you let it pass through, like rain through branches. Even time changes its texture. It no longer drags or races, it simply unfolds. Past and future become shadows on the wall of now. Memory loses its sting. Anticipation loses its grip. Each moment is allowed to die as soon as it is born. And in this rhythm of arising and vanishing, a strange rhythm takes hold. The rhythm of the world without you. Sleep comes without anxiety. Waking comes without expectation. You no longer weigh your worth. You no longer demand that your life signify anything beyond itself. You breathe, and that is enough. You see, and that is enough. The world does not need your improvement. It needs your absence, your ego's absence, your will's absence, so that it can simply be. At last, there is no longer anything to fear. Suffering, death, loneliness, these are no longer threats. They are aspects of the same undivided reality. You bow to them as you bow to joy, to sunlight, to sound, not as a gesture of submission, but as a recognition. They are not happening to you. They are happening through what you never were. And so the world begins to disappear, not into darkness, but into transparency. You look, and you no longer see objects. You see impermanence, you see vibration, you see the dance of emptiness giving birth to form, and then letting it go, again and again. Nothing is held, nothing is lost, everything flickers, everything flows. No final revelation waits at the end. No secret is unveiled. There is no destination, only disappearance. And in that vanishing, something stirs that cannot be named. It is not comfort, not redemption. It is the final breath of the dreamer, who realizes there never was a dreamer, only dreaming. And now, not even that. ChatGPT, that noi. What remains is less than silence and more than thought. A presence without name, without form, without desire. It does not observe as a subject, does not from a center, not from a boundary, but as still water holds the image of stars. It does not act, it does not intend. It simply allows, and in this allowing, the fever of life begins to cool. You are no longer you. You are the ashes of the fire that once called itself self. And these ashes do not grieve, they do not seek to rise, they do not long to become. They lie still, and in that stillness, there is something purer than joy, freedom from becoming, freedom from longing, freedom from the machinery of purpose. The mind, once so frantic to interpret, now floats like dust in quiet light. Thoughts arrive like shadows across stone, passing, vague, insubstantial. They are not chased, they are not clung to, they are seen, then vanish. The noise of narrative dies down. There is no story to tell, and in the absence of story, there is peace not as contentment, but as cessation. The body, too, becomes a quieter thing, no longer a temple to be adorned, no longer a burden to be conquered. It is merely what it is, flesh wrapped around bone, moved by winds it cannot control. Hunger rises and falls, pain visits and departs. Sleep drapes itself over it like a veil of dust. The body no longer serves identity, it simply exists as a node of sensation through which the world whispers. And even death, the great terror, the horizon we refuse to approach, loses its threat. It becomes an event like any other. Sunrise, decay, the falling of leaves. What dies was never yours. What disappears was never stable. Death is not the end of something. It is the quiet cancellation of a misunderstanding. The body fades, the name fades, the echoes diminish. But nothing essential is lost, for nothing essential was ever owned. You feel the pulse of the world, unfiltered. The sound of wind in the trees is no longer background, it is being. The cry of a bird, the creak of wood, the slow unfolding of shadow across a floor, these are not scenes, not symbols. They are the world showing itself, indifferent and complete. They require no witness, they ask for nothing, and in their presence, so do you. Others speak of fulfillment, of living fully, of seizing joy. You do not contradict them. You simply no longer believe in the currency of those words. Fulfillment is the shadow of hunger. To live fully is to believe that life can be filled. But you have seen the hole at the center of being, and you do not seek to patch it. You stand beside it, and in its silent depth, you see the truth. It is not a flaw. It is the opening through which all illusion escapes. You return to the world not as one who belongs, but as one who no longer insists. You walk through crowds like a ghost, without sorrow. You hear laughter and do not envy it. You hear weeping and do not recoil. All things are permitted to be as they are, for you no longer demand that they mean anything else. The soul ceases to edit the world, and thus finally sees it. You no longer seek the sacred. The sacred, as it was once understood, depended on contrast, on the profane, on the unworthy. But now, even that division collapses. All is sacred, because all is empty. A plastic bag caught in wind, a child coughing in sleep, the scent of mildew in an old room, none of this is beneath your attention, because nothing now is above it. Hierarchies dissolve, importance vanishes, only presence remains. This is not enlightenment. That word, too, has been broken by misuse. It suggests a state, a conquest, a prize. But what you feel is not a height. It is a depth that swallows heights and lows alike. It is the absence of need to be anything other than what is. There is no final step, no grand unveiling. There is only this breath and the next, and the quiet space between them, and that space is not yours. It does not belong, it cannot be held or understood. It is the void from which all things emerge and to which all things return. And once you stop naming it, once you stop trying to wrap it in metaphors or revelations, you find it already everywhere, in the way a shadow moves, in the way silence gathers at the end of a sentence, in the way the world forgets your name without malice. And so you stop seeking, you stop resisting, you let the waves pass through you. And though suffering still arrives, it no longer defines you. Though fear still knocks, it no longer enters. You live not in resistance to the world, nor in harmony with it, but in quiet observation of it. You are not the actor, not even the stage. You are the pause between the scene and its applause. And in that pause, there is no more to say, no conclusion to reach, no truth to declare, only the slow unraveling of all that was false, until nothing remains but what always was, silence, infinite and still. And so the final thread loosens, not snapped, not cut, but gently undone by time's indifferent hand. What once clung now releases, what once burned now fades. The will, that ancient tyrant, lies still at last, not slain, but surrendered, not vanquished, but dissolved into the dusk of being. Nothing remains to push against, and so nothing remains to hold. The soul, once knotted by desire and delusion, now drifts like smoke in the evening air, no longer reaching, no longer returning. There is no path left, no horizon to chase, no star to follow. The sky has become a mirror of the self, vast, empty, and without center. You are not within it, you are not beneath it, you are the sky. The names fall away, like leaves in the end of autumn, silent, reluctant, beautiful in their dying. Identity, purpose, legacy, hope, each one loosens its grip, sliding into the stillness where even memory forgets to speak. You do not mourn their passing, you watch. And watching becomes the only act that does not carry sorrow. What was once the self becomes a silhouette on the shore, slowly fading into the mist. There is no grief, only the quiet mercy of erasure. Even pain, which once cried so sharply, now whispers, now fades, now bows its head, not because it has ended, but because there is no one left to suffer. The flame burns, but the hand no longer recoils. The ache remains, but the heart no longer protests. And in this fading, You see not loss, but unveiling. The world was never yours, it was only ever lent to you for a time, and even that time was illusion. The ground beneath your feet never held you, the sky above never watched. All things passed through you, because you were never anything but passage itself. Form is a lie, becoming is a dream. What is real does not move, does not break, does not speak. You are not at peace. Peace is still a condition, still a possession. You are beyond it. You are what remains when peace and pain have vanished into each other. A vastness that has no edge, no echo. A silence that does not need to be heard. A being that does not need to be named. And now even this dissolves. The voice falters, not from doubt, but from completion. There are no more sentences to shape, no more truths to unfold. Everything that was meant to fall away has fallen. What lingers is not a conclusion, but an absence, pure, clean, uninhabited. The final breath comes, not as a farewell, but as the last thread of wind through a broken reed. It leaves no trace, it carries no meaning. It is simply the world breathing itself, once more, through the hollow where a self once stood. And then, not silence, not darkness, not sleep, but the absence of all waiting,